Hi, I'm Samartzis. I'm a sound artist and curator interested in practices of fieldwork and soundscape composition. And a part of my realm of interest, particularly around curation, is exemplified by a project that I'm involved in called the Bogong Centre for Sound Culture. I'm the artistic director, and it's an artist-led initiative located in the Victorian Alps near Falls Creek. Bogong village is located at around about 800 metres in elevation in Alpine National Park. We established it around about 2010 in order to chart the effects of climate change on the Australian Alps in particular, and look at issues such as the impact of sustainable energy on landscape ecology. Bogong Village is the site of the first hydroelectric scheme in mainland Australia, and most of the landscape around it has been transformed through heavy industrial practices. The rivers have been redirected in order to increase water flow from the snowmelt up at the top of the Alps in the Bogong High Plains. New dams have been built, water catchment areas. The landscape itself is like Swiss cheese in terms of tunnelling and hydroelectric power schemes. So it's a very rich environment to record in. The air is filled with charged particles, so wherever you go there's the buzz of electricity. So as a sound artist, that's something that piques my interest somewhat. But it's the play of the landscape, its specific acoustics, the mix of natural and anthropogenic sound, that is the built environment and the way it kind of is surrounded by nature in its beauty and wildness, which also interests me. And the initiative itself was established as a longitudinal investigation of the impact of climate change on the Australian Alps through the collective endeavour of visiting artists. And so we run an artist in residency program in which artists from across Australia and overseas come to make recordings, to document the environment in different ways. And it's our intention to tell the story of the Australian Alps through the collective work of our artists. And up to now, the first 10 years, we've had about 85 artists participate in our residency program. So in another 10 years, we'll have somewhere around 150, 160 different artists creating works in response to the natural environment. One of the key ideas of Bogong Centre for Sound Culture really comes out of this idea of field work. I've habitually gone somewhere in order to make recordings of an environment. Often I make the recordings, I try and compose as much as I can in situ, creating soundscape compositions, that kind of thing. But often I bring them back to my home base in Australia in order to finish the production in some shape or form, a final mix, a final kind of set of works that I broadcast or disseminate in different ways. The idea with Bogong, though, is that you are in the field and therefore you can step out of the Bogong Centre for Sound Culture, make your recordings, take your photographs, shoot your video, and then you have a studio immediately in situ to construct and complete your work. And that's a very different way of working and different way of thinking, because as you accumulate material, you're thinking through your practice and you're seeing the gaps, or you're seeing the opportunities that the documentation that you're capturing is affording you, and therefore you can step back outside again and take advantage of the location or the variable conditions. Being the Alps, the conditions are quite wild, and therefore lots of heavy winds and snow and really hot summers and that kind of thing. So the conditions are variable, and therefore you are free over that period of time to document a whole range of encounters of place and its set of conditions, which are quite unique to the Australian Alps. So that's the unique nature of Bogong. It's an extension of field practice and post-studio practice, which I mentioned previously, but within a kind of a supportive structure that encourages artists to think more deeply around site work. This probably leads me to another related project that I've been doing with Indigenous communities, initially in the Kimberley between 2010 and 2012, and now this year in the East Pilbara. It builds on this idea of socially engaged practice. So Bogong is an example of socially engaged practice where a story is being told through a community of artists working collaboratively. And that's not to say we're all saying the same thing. Our differences are as much a point of interest as our similarities in our set of concerns. The practices that I've enjoyed with Indigenous communities are very, very specific, because what I'm doing is trying to record an experience of country through the lens, through the listening of community, and try and capture their impressions, their knowledge, their experiences, their joys of place through the sounds that are important to them. So listening is cultural. So we mentioned previously again that there are certain sounds that might be attractive to your ears that may not necessarily be as interesting for others. That kind of can be music, but it can also be sound. Someone might hate the sound of traffic, for instance, but I love the sound of traffic. And the traffic to me sounds like the ocean, but it's far more complicated than the ocean as well. Once you throw in a few Harley Davidsons and a few Mack trucks driving down Hoddle Street, it's a very rich domain. But for all intents and purposes, people aren't like me. Most people are annoyed by those types of sounds. And similarly in the Kimberley, it's an alien environment. The flora and fauna are extremely different to that which I encounter here in Victoria, for instance. So my ears become much more attuned to the foreign, the alien. It's very much like travelling overseas for the first time. In that first 12 to 24 hours, everything's heightened and rich and detailed and really, really exciting and palpable, whether it's Tokyo or New York or London or Paris, Bali. Everything is kind of new, smells new, looks new, sounds different, that kind of thing. And visiting these kind of remote communities in the Kimberley is similarly like that to me. The flora, fauna is different, the way people live, the way they communicate, socialise, very, very different, very specific to those communities. But it's not my role as an artist to apply my cultural upbringing and my knowledge to that community. It's for me to listen and engage with that community in order to come up with a set of recordings that are reflective of their own concerns and lived experience and their traditional knowledge. And that's the beauty of a socially engaged practice, where you're using your skill set as a musician, as a composer, as a sound artist to kind of capture and reflect the profound knowledge and perceptual awareness of an environment through traditional owners. And some of the amazing things that I encountered was the sensitivity around the way the environment sounds as a signifier of changing seasons. The migration of animals, the way a rain tree might sound at a particular time of year are all markers of a change. And so we tend to think of seasons around winter, summer, autumn and spring within white Australian kind of culture. But in the Kimberley, they think of the seasons as 6 distinct seasons, and they're all marked by sound. Also, the role of anthropogenic sound. I mentioned earlier that I like traffic, for instance, and the Indigenous communities I worked with love the sound of cars and they love the sound of helicopters. So again, we can be quite judgmental in the things that we like or dislike, but sometimes it's really useful to kind of suspend judgment, not so much around the things we like and dislike, however, just to understand them for what they represent and how they occupy a particular acoustic environment. So working with communities, whether in Bogong or whether in the Kimberley, has really opened up a whole range of new encounters, experiences, conversations as to how sound can be used to reflect ideas of place, how it can impart new knowledge, new encounters, not only for the communities of those places, but also for broader dispersed communities within Australia and internationally. It's a conduit in how one can experience a location, its history, its people, its stories. I think that's really a great opportunity for any artist to think about and to take advantage of.